I'm a published novel that was clearly written as Eddie Munson fanfiction.
And I'm a second published novel that was clearly written as Eddie Munson fanfiction.
And it's weird it happened twice. I know that this is a silly, lighthearted video, but there is currently a genocide happening, so real quick, if you have a minute, please pause this video and check out the links I'm putting right below, where you can call your state representatives if you're in the US, or send a couple emails, which literally takes like 3 clicks. It's really fast. And you can do your part to at least try to end an ethnic cleanse that the US is currently actively funding. And thank you if you've already been doing whatever you can to help. Okay, thank you for your time. Now back to silly Eddie Munson fanfiction video.
I'm still 7 hours away by train. I would be there to film, but the past 10 days I've been in the hospital, twice, which it's weird that it happened twice. It's weird that it happened twice.
Yeah, well, you've been waiting to find out if you're an active organ failure or not. I've been going crazy about the Netflix original series Stranger Things.
Have fun telling everybody about that book you read where Eddie from Stranger Things punched a priest. Is that really what happens in that book?
Thanks, Noah. Love you, bestie.
Love you, bestie.
When the 4th season of Stranger Things premiered last year, the clear breakout character of the season was Eddie Munson, the drug-dealing super senior metalhead portrayed by Joseph Quinn. In a little over a year and a half, Eddie has become the second most popular Stranger Things character on AO3 and has sold like 1 million Hellfire Club t-shirts from Hot Topic. On October 31st, the official Eddie prequel book, Flight of Icarus, was released and marks the 6th Stranger Things tie-in novel, and I am here today to tell you all about it. Part 1 of this book was my overview of the first 5 books, and I'll link that up in the corner if you'd like to hear about those. Before I get to the latest release, though, I have 2 more books to talk about, which were also written about Eddie Munson. These ones were not officially licensed and changed the names of the characters, but they are both very clearly about Eddie Munson from Stranger Things. Like, that's straight up just Eddie Munson fan art on both covers. They did not even try to make it not look like him. So I read both of those and I'm going to tell you about those first. If you are only interested in hearing about Flight of Icarus, I will try to make it very easy to just skip forward to that part if you don't care about these fanfiction books, even though personally I found them very entertaining. The first book published about Eddie Munson from Stranger Things was The Kiss of '89 by Ruth Hanson, which came out in November of 2022. This one is very clearly steady fanfiction, which is Steve and Eddie, a pairing which currently has about 21,500 fics on AO3 and is the current most popular ship in the fandom. To be completely honest, I didn't really like Eddie that much in the show when I first watched it, because I didn't really like who he was written, and his whole character arc just kind of sucked. But then more recently I started reading more Stranger Things fanfiction because I hyperfixated, and I do like a lot of the fanon interpretations of Eddie, and that made me start to like him a lot more. I do also appreciate that his popularity basically hit Billy Hargrove's popularity with its car and killed him on impact, so I am forever in his debt for that. Which is all to say that I've read like a lot of steady fanfiction now because they're in like most fics, so I am very well versed in the common tropes and cliches of steady fics, and this book fully embraces those in a way that I found kind of charming. Our main character in the book is Wesley Peters, a recent high school graduate who has fallen from his place as the most popular boy in school, captain of the swim team, and prom king, with a perfect valedictorian girlfriend, to an unpopular loser with a summer job at the mall. He was once hailed as the king of their small town, Duffer Springs, but then his father was arrested for fraud, and overnight his whole world turned upside down. He's Steve Harrington from Stranger Things, but blonde. It's gonna get real confusing trying to keep straight who's who with all of the various names going on, so I made some little visual aids to help you along. Enter the love interest, Nikki Hoffman, the local weirdo metalhead high school dropout. He's Eddie Munson from Stranger Things. Little to no changes. The two of them grow closer over the summer while co-parenting Wes's younger friend who used to babysit, and they drive around a lot in Nikki's van, and Wes hangs out at his band practices and they smoke weed together, and Wes comes to realize that he is in fact bisexual and in love with Nikki. It's the average steady fic on AO3. Plot-wise, Wes's ex-girlfriend Lisa has a new boyfriend who's an asshole, and he has it out for Wes in a very season 2 Billy way. He's kind of like a cross between Billy and Jason, but like amplified. There's a dramatic third act misunderstanding between Wes and Nikki where they break up and then reunite, but then Lisa's shitty boyfriend shows up and sees them kissing and beats them up. But everything works out and Lisa's a lesbian and they're all fine. Throughout it, Nikki frequently calls Wes Big Boy and Sailor, even though the sailor thing has no significance for his character. They communicate largely over walkie-talkies. Robin, Dustin, and Erica are kind of all squished into one character, which was a little bit disappointing because I love all their characters separately, and I really like all their unique dynamics with Steve. But the character was very cute, and her name is Macy, and in one part some mean girls from school cut her hair to sleep over, so Wes and Nikki gave her a fun punk makeover to cheer her up, and that was very cute. At one point, Wes decided he needed to find out how to have gay sex, so he went to the local Spencer's Gifts and got a sex ed lesson from a stoner guy who worked there, who was for sure based on Argyle, and that scene was very fun. Hansen definitely didn't shy away from making Nikki just be Eddie Munson from Stranger Things, but specifically the fun fanon version of him. Like, they didn't try to make him cool, which is a misstep I think a lot of people make. They let him just be very dorky and geeky and silly. They also made him gay and Jewish and gave him a van with a unicorn airbrushed on the side, so like, they made an Eddie Munson I can get into. Maybe I would be an Eddie stan if he had a unicorn airbrushed on the side of his van. I think that would make me like pretty much any character. I like unicorns, if you can't tell by my little unicorn bookends, and also all of the various unicorns in my room, and also my unicorn tattoo. As a book, I would rate it like 6.5 or 7 out of 10. It wasn't anything like groundbreaking, but it was cute and enjoyable, and it was only like 200 pages, so I read it very easily in a day. As a piece of fan fiction, I would give it also like a 7 out of 10. These ratings feel kind of low because I did enjoy this book, but as I said before, this is just the average steady fan fiction on AO3. If you enjoy steady fanfiction, you will probably enjoy this book. In general, I think published fanfiction is kind of camp, and I love that this author clearly leaned into it by slipping as many Stranger Things references as they could without getting a cease and desist. Like, they called the town Duffer Springs. He's the king of the spring, because they live in Duffer Springs. You could definitely read like this exact same story on AO3 for free, but I paid like $2 for my digital copy, and I think it was worth it because I had fun reading it. If you want to spend $2 for a fun, silly time and read some published Stranger Things fanfiction, go for it, it's fun. The second piece of published Eddie Munson fanfiction was L.H. Blake's A Song of Sin and Salvation, which came out this past June for Pride Month. This one was bad. It was a bad book. It was over 500 pages and I read every one of them. Somehow it has an average rating of 4.5 stars on Goodreads, and I don't understand how. Straight people with low standards, but like, aside from the many fics about him kissing Steve, there are also currently 3,600 Eddie Munson x Reader fics on AO3 and 2,800 Eddie Munson x Chrissy Cunningham fics. I'm sure there's more on Wattpad, but I cannot for the life of me figure out how to find those stats. Anyway, this one is an Eddie x Chrissy fic. I think their ship is Hellcheer. It's a Hellcheer fic. Unlike the last one where the author leaned into the book being clearly fanfiction, L.H. Blake tries to water everything down to the base essentials to try and make it feel more generic, but it doesn't really work, either in making it feel not like fanfiction or in making it good. Our Chrissy stand-in is Rebecca Breyer, who is not Chrissy from Stranger Things. She's a completely original character. She is a ballerina, not a cheerleader, with very strict religious parents and a mom who makes her have an eating disorder and a possessive religious jock boyfriend who is not Jason from Stranger Things. Different character. The whole town is shaken up when James Walton, a metalhead guitar player who drives a van and does drugs and is repeating his senior year of high school, moves in next door with his aunt. Not his uncle, because he is not Eddie from Stranger Things, he is a unique and different character. They're Eddie and Chrissy from Stranger Things, except Chrissy is a ballerina, and Eddie is largely unchanged. Eddie is Eddie forever. The book opens with the dedication to all the girls who were told they were to blame for the sins of boys, and to all the boys who showed them that that's bullshit. it sets the tone. Rebecca is very repressed, and James keeps seeing her naked because their bedroom windows face each other, and it's very scandalous. It switches between their POVs every chapter, and when he first sees her, he thinks, okay, maybe I like all girls, especially naked ones, especially with big, innocent eyes begging for corruption. Fuck, the thought of bringing her over here and her touching me unfurls through my mind. What would her mom and dad think of their little angel if they caught her with her mouth wrapped around mine? And luckily that thought is interrupted by his aunt. And then he has to go downstairs and eat dinner with an erection. She keeps trying to avoid him because she's a good Christian girl with a good Christian boyfriend, but James is intrigued by her and keeps trying to talk to her, but also is pretending he doesn't like her, so there's like an enemies to lovers thing happening. And there's my least favorite passage of the book. Is she simply trying to make a liar out of me? Throw it in my face that I told her she isn't my type? If that's the case, then call me Pinocchio, because my nose and something else must be a mile long right now. Eventually they form a tentative friendship that quickly turns romantic and then quickly turns sexual. Their relationship for most of the book is just a cycle of her parents or her boyfriend being mean and controlling, and then James showing her even a little bit of kindness and empathy, and then her letting him see her naked as a reward, and then freaking out about how she's gonna go to hell, and then he says, no you're not, hell's not real, and then she says, oh okay, here's my boobs, and then it repeats again. She finds out that her shitty boyfriend is cheating on her, and so she uses that to blackmail him into letting her cheat on him with James. So they get closer and fall in love, and he cures her eating disorder, and she has her first orgasm like halfway through the book, and then it's mostly just horny nonsense for a while. The shitty boyfriend is mad about them hooking up, so he spreads rumors that James is a Satanist, and then also tells everybody that James is a creep who like forced himself on Rebecca, and it's a whole thing. Speaking of, I need to mention sexual assault for a second, so just a warning. There's a whole subplot where James finds out that his mom was sexually assaulted in high school, and that was what set her on the path of addiction and depression that eventually led to her death, and he spends a while trying to work out who the assailant was, and then while he and Rebecca are in the police station, he sees Rebecca's pastor and realizes that it was the pastor who did it, so he attacks him and punches him in the face and is arrested. The cops call Rebecca's parents and tell them that she was with James and that he punched their pastor, so they freak out and lock her in her room and say they're gonna send her to the Sisters of Quiet Mercy from Riverdale. It's just the Sisters of Quiet Mercy from Riverdale. The pastor shows up to gaslight her or whatever, and then she blackmails him into dropping the charges against James so he'll be let out of prison, and then when her parents let her out of the house specifically to go to the high school graduation, James shows up and rescues her, and they run away together to live happily ever after, and also it's revealed that Rebecca's shitty boyfriend did cheat on her, but not with the girl she thought he cheated on her with. Actually, he was cheating on her with a boy because he was secretly gay the whole time. And so then at the end, when she runs away from graduation, he's like, go, live your dream, be free. Forget about all those times I tried to pressure you into having sex with me. That was fine actually, because I'm gay. Diversity win. This book was bad. James's mom died from AIDS. That was just kind of slipped in there. Rebecca's mom sews all of her clothes and makes them too small to give her an eating disorder, like that time in Glee, and she only feeds her apple slices. When Rebecca finds out that James has had premarital sex before, she fully faints in a diner, and then they have premarital sex in the back of his van while she's in her prom dress and there's lit candles in the back of his van, and then they fall asleep in the back of his van where there are lit candles. At one point he takes off her huge voluminous prom dress and just tosses it over his shoulder where the lit candles are in the back of his van. You know, the back of his van. I went into this book trying very hard to give it a fair chance because it is self-published, and I was assuming that the target audience would be like younger teenage girls who aren't lesbians. That's 2 strikes against me. Not a teenage girl and am a lesbian. So obviously it's not for me. And then it just kind of kept getting hornier, and I realized that it is not a YA book. I don't know who this book is for, because it doesn't really feel well written enough to appeal to adults, but there's way too many sex scenes for it to be for kids, so it's just bad all around. I still felt a little bit bad critiquing it so harshly, and then I found out that the author, L.H. Blake, is a high school teacher with 2 children, and then I felt fine about it, actually. Imagine your teacher wrote this book, and then you had to go to class. It wasn't even good as fan fiction. Like, I don't ship Eddie and Chrissy, so I don't know if this is how people generally write them in romantic fics, but I do think the scene with them in the show was cute, and I liked their dynamic, and I like when people write them as best friends, because it's fun. I do think they're fun together. This book just took away anything fun about their dynamic, and just kind of turned them into stock romance protagonists. They don't have, like, cute banter or anything. She just cries and gets naked, and he goes, hubba hubba bazinga, awooga, and then punches a priest. Also, because she made Chrissy a ballerina instead of a cheerleader, I just kept thinking about how much I would rather be watching the Grace and Rich episode of Skins. If the concept of ballerina metalhead romance appeals to you in any way, just go watch that instead. It's so much more fun. I was down for this book to just be like a fun, frivolous little beach read. And then it wasn't. I said before that I'm not like a huge Eddie fan, but I do really like parts of his character, and unfortunately none of those parts were in this book. James is just if you made the worst possible version of Eddie. He's Nightmare Eddie. L.H. Blake just took the very surface details of his character and used those but left out literally anything fun about him. He does not play D&D, he does not like Tolkien or anything nerdy, he does not have any friends, especially not any younger friends. His entire life is just playing guitar and smoking weed and dating Chrissy. Rebecca. Also, not to sound heterophobic, but Eddie Munson has to be gay or he sucks. I mean that generally as a character, but also within the show I only like Eddie at all if I'm reading him as fully 100% gay. And I don't mean that in like a biphobic way, I just mean like he cannot be looking at any woman with anything more than a detached fondness and respect, or I hate him. Like, the character does not work for me if the scene with Chrissy was him for real genuinely flirting with her. Like, the only time we ever see him be at all nice to anybody before all the Vecna stuff is with Chrissy, and if it's because he thinks she's hot, it just ruins all of that for me, and it makes his character feel icky. It paints a picture of a very specific type of guy who I hate, and that's why I had a really hard time liking Eddie at first. Unfortunately, this book was very specifically that version of Eddie. I also only like him if he's autistic and has ADHD, but that's a whole other thing. He was way too neurotypical in this book. As a book, I would give it maybe a 2 out of 10. I would recommend this book only and specifically if you have a group chat of friends you can torture with screenshots and updates, because that was the only enjoyable aspect of it. If you're gonna read it, it has to be in like a book club kind of setting with your friends where you're all just reading it and commiserating together. I think that could be fun. As a piece of fan fiction, also like 2 out of 10 at the highest. I know it's not fan fiction, but also it is very clearly fan fiction. There was absolutely no reason for it to be set in the 80s. The cover art looks like that. Also, again, I am an artist. I'm allowed to critique art. It's not good. I hate this new style of like romance cover art. And like, yeah, of course this one has that. As I'm sure you can tell if you've ever watched any of our videos, I love fanfiction, and I think it is a respectable art form. And I wanted to at least have fun reading this book, but it was bad. It wasn't even fun. Even if you love Eddie and Chrissy together, there are surely better fics available. You deserve better. And now I'm gonna let future Chloe take over. Bye. The latest edition of the Stranger Things book franchise, Flight of Icarus by Caitlin Schneiderhan, is finally out, and I got a copy as soon as it got in at my local bookstore, and then I read it in between Halloween activities so that I may recount it to you all. I am gonna give a spoiler warning, but also it's a prequel, so like, you know where he's gonna end up. You know he's gonna get eaten by bats. You know the book isn't gonna end with him forming a bat-proof exoskeleton over his body. That would rock, actually. Also, If you want a copy of this book for yourself, stick around until the end and I'll tell you how to enter a giveaway to win this exact copy for free. Flight of Icarus is set in the spring semester of 1984 at Hawkins High between seasons 1 and 2 of Stranger Things. It opens on a Hellfire Club meeting led by Eddie and featuring sophomore Jeff and freshman Gareth, and introducing new characters Dougie, Stan, and Ronnie. Ronnie is pretty much immediately established as Eddie's Robin. She's his best friend and platonic soulmate who he once thought he had a crush on and who immediately rejected him. She is definitely set up to be a sexual representation, but it's very blink and you'll miss it. Like, the only mention is that when she was 13 and he tried to kiss her, she said, quote, she didn't think she'd ever have a crush on anybody. It's something, at least. It's something. Ronnie, Dougie, and Jeff all play in Corroded Coffin with Eddie, and they do their weekly gig at the Hideout, where Eddie also works as a bar back. He's 18 and he just works at a bar and it's fine. During the show, he notices a rare newcomer at the bar who is a hot girl named Paige. He's immediately into her and she's immediately into him in a way that feels crazy because to me, Eddie Munson looks like this. So I don't understand the appeal, but she does. And she reveals that she works as a junior scout at a record label in LA and she thinks that he could make it big. He goes home to find that his dad has reappeared after a couple years of being MIA, as he has been off and on since Eddie was a kid. During those times, his Uncle Wayne always looks after him and clearly does not get along with Eddie's dad, who is like a combination of early Jughead's dad in Riverdale and Finn's dad in Adventure Time, just to give you an idea of the vibe. It's very, come here, boy. Let's commit a felony. Father-son bonding. Eddie is hesitant to trust his dad because he's never been reliable, but also Eddie has insane daddy issues and desperately craves his dad's love, so there's some internal conflict there. His dad explains that he has this huge gambling debt that he really needs to pay off, but he's got a plan to get the money he needs. A big-time drug supplier will have a freight truck loaded with weed traveling across the country in a few weeks, and Eddie's dad is going to steal enough weed off the truck to sell and cover his debts. He says that he needs Eddie's help with the heist, but Eddie does not want any part of it. It's established early on that everybody in town expects Eddie to end up like his dad, and it's only a matter of time before he ends up in prison next to his dad, so he doesn't want to just prove them right. The next day at school, Eddie rescues Gareth from Tommy H., Jason, and a couple other basketball players who have all been bullying him. Chrissy is also there and is trying to stop them, and we get a flashback to the middle school talent show when Eddie first met Chrissy. Eddie's dad had promised that he'd be there to see Eddie's band play their Judas Priest cover, but the whole show before his act, Eddie was just up sitting in the catwalk looking for him and waiting for him to show up. Chrissy came up and sat next to him to look out at the audience too, and she asked who he was looking for, and Eddie told her that his dad had to be running late or something, and Chrissy said that she wished her mom was running late, and they had a moment of like silent camaraderie over having kind of shitty parents. And then Eddie's band was called on stage, and Chrissy told him, if your dad gets held up, I'll cheer for you, and shook her little pom-poms. And it was a very sweet little interaction to just kind of slip in there, and I'm glad that it didn't seem to be played as like romantic, because I think they could have easily leaned into Eddie like having a crush on her, and as I've said before, I don't like the vibe of that. So this got to just be like this little kindness. A teacher shows up to break up the fight, and Eddie is blamed for it and sent to the principal's office. The principal berates him and starts planting the seeds that no matter what Eddie does, he will always be his father's son and he will ruin everything and everyone around him. He goes back to the bar and sees Paige again and asks her to talk outside, and she clearly thinks he's propositioning her, and again, she is into it.
Her?
But actually he just wants to talk about his music, and she's like, oh, okay, sure. He asks her to recommend Corroded Coffin to her boss, and she agrees, but says that first he'll need to record a demo in an actual studio, and if that goes well, he'll have to come out to LA to audition in person, all of which will cost a lot of money that he does not have. She promises him that if he does it though, he'll be a rock hero, and all of his dreams will come true. Eddie goes back to talk to his dad and agrees to help with the whole weed heist as long as he gets a cut of the profits so he can fund a demo and get to California. They start to work out the details of the plan, and his dad takes him to meet Reefer Rick for the first time, who will be buying their stolen weed to redistribute. Before they record their demo, Paige asks Eddie how he got so into music, and he tells her the story of how his mom grew up in Tennessee surrounded by country and blues, and she always really loved all the music there, and then when she met his dad, dad and they moved to Indiana. She brought all her old records with her and would listen to them when she got homesick to feel like she was back home in Tennessee. And then when Eddie was 6, she got sick and died, and he kept all of her records to feel closer to her. And he liked that they all told kind of sad stories. And then later when he got into metal, he liked that it also told a lot of kind of sad stories, but this time in like very epic ways. They record their demo and Eddie helps his dad steal a tow truck that they need for their plan. There's like a little mini heist. He almost gets shot, but it's fine. Tommy H and co get in a fight with Hellfire again, and Eddie is again sent to the principal, who basically says, "Nobody at the school likes you, and you actively make everything around you worse, and I don't want to deal with you anymore, so I would love it if you would just drop out of school and never come back here again." And Eddie's like, "Yeah, fuck it, okay, bye. Screw you guys." So he drops out. Personally, I found this very stupid, specifically because it was established to be May of his senior year, and it really feels like everybody involved could have just stuck it out a couple more weeks. Like, they never explicitly said that he was failing and wouldn't have graduated if he just stayed a little longer. But I digress. Eddie and Paige go for a drive in his van, and she tells him that her boss liked the demo and wants Eddie to come audition for him, and he kisses her in celebration. She is, again, into it.
Her?
But he's like, wait, hold on. I need to go call the band and tell them. And she's like, "Oh, no, yeah, he didn't like the band, he liked you. He doesn't want Corroded Coffin to come out to LA, he just wants you to come out." Eddie is kind of put off by that, but then she tells him to take off his pants, and they presumably go have sex in a field. Still don't get it. Everything's coming up Eddie. His dad finds out that he's planning to move to California as soon as he has the money, and asks if he can come with him and they could be like a real family and have Sunday dinners together. And Eddie's feeling very hopeful for the future, because again, he has a lot of daddy issues, so this sounds perfect. Then Ronnie comes over and he has to explain that he dropped out and is moving across the country without them all, and she's mad that he's just abandoning everybody because Hellfire is important to them all, which doesn't 100% make sense if they're about to graduate in like 2 weeks anyway. But she leaves and now he's got 20 pounds of weed to go steal. I do appreciate that they didn't go for the cliche of like everyone being like, "You're selling out, man. I can't believe you would take a record deal without your band." Because it feels like they would have just been happy for him. I don't necessarily love the angle they went with, but it is at least a different angle than like the very cliched sellout angle. Okay, so the weed heist plan is very complicated. I'm gonna do my best to give you a full run through of how that went down. Eddie waits at the Indiana state line to spot the truck when it passes through, and then he follows it until it stops for gas, at which time he sneaks over and pours water into their gas tank so that when they drive away the engine will give out after a few miles. In the meantime, Eddie's dad calls the only garage in the area for a tow and calls them to a location where they have previously set out tire spikes, so those guys will be stuck, and then he can take over the garage and pose as a mechanic and answer the phone when the truck guys call for a tow. And then Eddie arrives with the stolen tow truck from earlier to bring them to the garage where his dad is, and then they can pretend to be fixing the truck while secretly stealing a bunch of weed out the back. That goes on for like 35 pages with some close calls where they're almost found out, and I do think this part of the book is really successful in like building suspense, because like yes, it's a prequel and you know he's gonna kind of end up back where he started. You know that this isn't going to work out for him, but you don't know how it's going to go wrong or when it's going to go wrong, and so there is still some suspense there. But everything works out, and they're able to take the weed back to Reefer Rick and sell it for $15,000. Paige invites Eddie over to meet her parents before she heads back to California, and she asks him to move in with her when he meets her out there next week. Everything's going great for him. But then he gets home and the two guys who were driving the weed truck appear and corner him and drag him inside, and it is revealed that actually they know his dad, and while his dad was gone the last time, he was actually working with them as the second in command of the whole drug ring, but he got greedy and he wanted it all for himself. He actually wasn't in any debt, he was just manipulating Eddie to get him to help with the whole scheme, because everyone else he knows is just done with his shit and would not have gone in on this with him. But he knows that Eddie has daddy issues and would be very easily manipulated. The guys take back the money that they had gotten from Reefer Rick, and also they set fire to Eddie's house, burning all of his mom's records in the process. They all run outside and are met by an original cop character who one of the guys shoots so they can get away. Eddie's dad tells them that they should run too, but Eddie won't leave the cop, just bleeding out on the ground, and he tries to stop the bleeding while his dad steals his van and drives away. He says he'll, leave it outside of town for him, but, steals the van and drives off. Eddie spends the night in jail, and Hopper is there, and he's nice to him and lets him call Paige from his office. Eddie tells Paige that he will not be making it to California after all, and admits that he got arrested. They have a brief fight, and she hangs up on him, but does later pay his bail. So that was nice of her. Wayne picks him up and brings him back to his trailer and gives him everything he was able to salvage from the fire, including Eddie's guitar, which was unharmed. After a few days of moping, Eddie starts to feel like a burden on Wayne and goes back to Reefer Rick and asks to work with him so he can help Wayne pay the bills because he does not think anybody else in town would hire him. Nobody in this town likes him. After that, Eddie goes to the record store to try and replace some of his mom's records, and he sees Jonathan and Will there, who came in to buy an unspecified Smiths record, which, because it's spring of 1984, would have to be the Smiths self-titled, which at least makes slightly more sense than Jonathan having made Will a mixtape with the Smiths on it before the fall of '83, because the This Charming Man single wasn't even available in the US until December of '83, and Hand in Glove would have been really hard to get a hold of, especially in a small town in Indiana, but not everybody had the Smiths as their special interest in high school, I guess. Jonathan has to leave Will alone for a minute to go into the back, and some mean kids come in and call Will Zombie Boy and are about to throw a baseball at his head when Eddie realizes that because everybody already hates him in this town, that gives him the freedom to make himself as big of a target as he needs to direct attention away from the more vulnerable kids. He makes a big scene to distract the kids and calls one of them Big Boy and saves Will from any violence. It is a very nice scene to kind of see his character turning into what we see of him 2 years later. Jonathan and the shop owner come back, and Eddie tells Will that Zombie Boy is a very metal nickname and he should be proud of it, and also that he should join Hellfire when he gets to high school. And then he tries to sell Jonathan weed, and Jonathan, quote, looks too appalled for someone with that haircut. Eddie goes back to the school on the last day before summer break and declares that he is re-enrolling, and when the principal tries to stop him, Eddie blackmails him by pointing out the drugs in his desk drawer and says that if he lets Eddie come back to school and continue running Hellfire, without any interference from the staff, he won't tell anyone about the drugs, and he'll make sure that Reefer Rick keeps selling to him, and the principal agrees. Then Eddie finds Hellfire in the midst of a very unsuccessful campaign without him, and he apologizes and asks if he can come back and be the DM again, and after a little hesitation, they welcome him back, and everything's okay again, and then he hears some bullies out in the hall, calling some kid a freak, and Eddie goes out to save him and says, "Hey there, fellas, I heard you were looking for me," and they say, "Why would we be looking for you?" And Eddie says, in the last line of this book, "Because you wanted a freak, sweetheart. Congratulations, you found the biggest one in Hawkins." The end. Last line of the book is him calling some guy sweetheart. Overall, I'd say this definitely wasn't my favorite of the Stranger Things books, but it wasn't bad. It was very readable, and I do think it was kind of fun that Caitlin Schneiderhan is actually a writer on Stranger Things, but I don't know if that really had any benefit. I don't know anything about this author, so it's possible that she absolutely loves Eddie as a character and was really excited to write this book, but I think more than any of these other tie-in novels, this one really felt like an assignment someone had been given. Like, the Robin and Lucas books were both ranked kind of in the middle of my list as books, but I really enjoyed reading them because they both felt like they were written as these acts of love for those characters and this show, and it felt like the authors had a lot that they were just really excited to bring to the table. Just genuinely loved these characters and were really excited to be able to put their own spin on them. I feel like we didn't really see a new side of Eddie in this book, or get a lot of new insight about his character. Like, as someone who's already kind of neutral on Eddie, it didn't make me like him any more or less than I did before, whereas the Max and Lucas books both left me really appreciating those characters more than ever. I've talked about two other versions of Eddie in this video, Nikki from The Kiss of '89 and James from A Song of Sin and Salvation, one of whom I liked a lot more than Eddie in the show, and one of whom I did not like at all. If we were to make a scale of Eddie characterization from fun gay Eddie with a unicorn van to horny heterosexual Eddie who has no hobbies, I think canon show Eddie is like pretty close to the middle, but leaning a little more towards the fun side. Like, he's still kind of up for interpretation, but definitely more towards the fun side. I was curious to see where the Eddie in this book would land, and it's still pretty right in the middle for me. Just for fun, I put a little tab every time he did something kind of gay, and then one for every time he did something straight, and I ended up with 6 gay tabs and 5 straight tabs, so again, kind of right in the middle, which, yes, you could very easily read as him being bisexual, and you can absolutely do that, but this is not about me trying to prove that Eddie is secretly gay or bi, it's more to prove my hypothesis that me liking his character depends solely on how gay he is at any given moment, and in this book he's only like medium gay. I need him to be like so gay for me to like him. I would love to know who decided that one of his character traits is that he just flirts with men sometimes, because somewhere along the way somebody threw that in there and now they can't take it out, so like he also just flirts with men in this sometimes. In one part, the original cop character pulls him over and says, "I'll be keeping an eye on you," and Eddie specifically bats his eyelashes and says, "Promise?" I would love if that was just his vibe the whole time. I also kept tabs for weird discrepancies with canon, which include Jeff plays bass in Corroded Coffin, even though he is shown in the show to play guitar, and unnamed Freak plays bass. And this isn't like a full continuity error, because like I always played bass in bands in high school and now I don't, so like he could have just switched to guitar in the past 2 years, but it feels more like just a small mistake that got overlooked. The original cop character is not Hopper, and he is not Callahan or Powell, and like, yes, it is possible there are more cops in this town, but it's weird to not just go with one of them. That was just a weird thing. Tommy H's last name is wrong. In the show, the H stands for Hagen, and in this book, it stands for Hayes. So that was just weird. Not a continuity error, but more of just like a missed opportunity. There isn't really anything about Eddie being a coward in this book. My least favorite thing about Eddie Munson is his character arc, and especially his death. I think the repeated thing about how he's like racked with guilt for running away when Chrissy died is really stupid, because like he didn't really, like he stayed there until there was literally nothing he could have done to help her, and then he ran away because he was scared and traumatized and just witnessed a horrific thing, and like maybe he could have called an ambulance or something first, but we as an audience know that that would not have helped her. And I wish that his character arc had been about like accepting that there was nothing he could have done, and that sometimes you're just helpless in a situation, and I wish that at any point one of the other characters had been like, "Hey bud, it's okay. Like, you did all that you could, and it's fine, and this is not on you." But instead they tried to give him this whole complex about how he's a coward who always runs away, and it just didn't work for me at all, and they already kind of did that arc with Bob in season 2 where he got to sacrifice himself and save everyone, but that was done so much better, to the point where it makes Eddie's arc look so much worse. I have rewatched his death scene so many times, and I have never been able to work out how his death actually would have helped at all. Like, yes, he was protecting Dustin and leading the bats away from him, but it really feels like there were other ways to do that, like, I don't know, following him through the gate and taking shelter somewhere together. But instead he ran outside to get eaten by bats, and it did nothing. He just felt like being eaten by bats that day, I guess. I have made the comparison many times to many people that his death scene is like if in season 2 everybody got out of the lab and they were safe and they were just waiting for Bob, and then they saw him coming through and there were like some demogorgons behind him but like a ways off, so like there's plenty of time for him to come out and them to close the door and run away, and then he got right to like the threshold of the door and they were like, "Okay Bob, come on, everything's all good," and he just stopped and said, "No." And then he turned around and walked back inside and made them all watch him get torn to shreds for no reason at all. Like, that would have been very stupid. And it was stupid when they did it with Eddie. It has always felt to me like they wrote down the beat that Eddie dies in the battle, and then they never really figured out how that would happen, so they had to just make it happen. And this is what we got, and I have always hated it. I have always thought it was stupid and pointless. I hate it so much that it distracts me from his character as a whole. All that to say, I was hoping that the author would maybe use this book as an opportunity to like recontextualize that part of Eddie's character, and she kind of does, but not enough to make it work for me. And that might just be nitpicky, but I have a lot of feelings about how stupid Eddie's death was, and this book didn't help me with those. Throughout it, there's a few references to Eddie running, but those mostly feel pretty incidental, and they're never really about like cowardice or anything. And then when the weed guys shoot the cop and his dad is trying to get him to leave with him, there's definitely hints of him like watching his dad run away and having that kind of settle into him that he doesn't want to be like his dad, and he doesn't want to just run away when he could be helping somebody. But it felt like that scene could have been played for like a much bigger moment than it was. Also, I don't know where else to put this, so can I just say, it's weird he's still in high school in season 4. I always assumed the little joke about, that's what you said last year, and the year before that, was a joke, and we were not supposed to be taking it seriously as this is his 3rd senior year. I figured he was just redoing his senior year because that's a thing people do sometimes. I don't think they would just let him keep going to school when he's 20. I think if he still hadn't passed the 2nd time, they would just tell him to go get his GED at like night school or whatever, like a normal person. I even asked my parents just to confirm that this wasn't just like a thing that happened in the 80s, and they said, no, it's crazy if he's 20, and they would not let that happen. So like, it's weird that this book took a firm stance on his age and grade in 1984 and made it 18 and senior year of high school. 1st senior year, presumably. Maybe he's just been going to high school forever. Okay, so this video is just where I info dump about my hyperfixations in high school, but I kept expecting there to be something like when Darby Crash of the Germs was in high school, and he kept pretending to be a member of the Manson family and like starting cults at school and stuff, and it was freaking everyone out, so the principal went to him and was like, okay, I will pass you in all of your classes if you just promise to stop coming to school. Like, just don't come back here, please. And Darby Crash was like, yes, okay, cool. And then he just kind of kept coming to high school anyway because he was bored. And that makes more sense to me than whatever Eddie Munson has going on. I was also kind of disappointed in the lack of metal in this book. I expected there to be a lot of it. And I think Judas Priest might be one of, if not the only band that gets name dropped, and that might have been a conscious choice to avoid alienating the audience, but that really felt like a misstep. One of Eddie's main characteristics is that he's a metalhead, and I don't know if the author is a metal fan or not, but it really feels like this book should have been given to like the Rob Sheffield of metal music. Like, this book should have been a love letter to metal music and even country music and blues because he has that connection with his mom. It should have been a music book, and it didn't ever really feel like that for me. I just kept thinking about my friend Phoenix, who's super into 80s metal and writes really good Hobbit fanfiction where the Sons of Durin are all in metal bands, and what someone like her could have done with this book. I think it would have really captured just like the music nerd vibes better than this book did. I will put a link to her Metal Hobbit series down below if you'd like to read that, and you should, it's really good. I think if Eddie Munson existed today, he would be her biggest fan. And I really hope this doesn't come off as like criticism of this author, because I do think the writing itself was good. I believe this is Schneiderhan's first novel, which I think makes sense. Like, again, this isn't a bad book. I think she did a good job. I don't want it to sound like I didn't like this book, because I did. I just kept wanting it to be more, if that makes sense. Like, I'm curious if a different author might have written a completely different version of this book, or if she was kind of given an outline from Netflix that she had to work off of, and this is just what she was able to do with that. I do think if you're a fan of Eddie and you really like his character, you'll definitely enjoy this book, and it's entirely possible that my kind of lukewarm feelings about him colored my reception of it, but I did enjoy reading it, and it was a pretty quick read, so like, I'd recommend it as like a fun little weekend read. As a book, I'd give it like an 8 out of 10. It was pretty good, and it felt like a very complete story. Like, some of these books have really relied on being tie-ins to a franchise, so they don't really stand alone as their own stories very well, but this one definitely does. Like, I think someone who's never seen Stranger Things could easily read this book and enjoy it without any context from the show. As a tie-in, like, 6 out of 10. Of all the Stranger Things companion novels, this one had the least to do with Stranger Things. I can very easily list off for you now every instance in which a Stranger Things character other than Eddie or his bandmates is mentioned. Tommy H., Jason, and Chrissy show up when the jocks bully Gareth. Jason mentions that they should be careful Harrington doesn't see them because he doesn't like them bullying other kids now that he's dating Nancy. Eddie meets Reefer Rick. Eddie misses a Hellfire meeting and Ronnie says, "Dougie thought you vanished like that Byers kid." Paige's parents mention the Hollands in passing and how they still haven't found Barb. Hopper makes his brief appearance when Eddie's arrested. Eddie meets Will and Jonathan at the record store. And that's it. Other than those brief mentions, this book could be set in any town, at any high school. It really only exists because Eddie became such a popular character so quickly and they knew that if they gave him a spin-off it would sell well. And it worked, because I paid $30 to buy it and read it, and it was fine. Speaking of, if you have made it this far in the video and I wasn't too mean about this book and you still want to read it, but you don't want to spend $30, you can have this copy. To enter the giveaway, just make sure that you're subscribed to our channel, like this video, and comment whatever you want. Just throw a bat emoji somewhere in there so that we know you're entering. It can even just be a bat emoji. Also, unfortunately, I'm going to say that you have to be in the US unless you want to cover the shipping cost yourself, because international shipping gets very expensive and we still don't make any money off this channel. So yes, be in the US, like and subscribe, and comment a bat, and I will pick a winner on November 15th. That gives you like 2 weeks. I hope you enjoyed little story time where I tell you about Eddie Munson from Stranger Things. If you enjoyed this video, like, comment, and subscribe. All of our links are down in the description below. I hope you had fun. Also, I know by the time you're seeing this it's after Halloween, but it will have been recently Halloween, so happy Halloween, besties. Bedtime, baby. Okay, bye. Sit on our log. We'll have fun with HedgeFrog. No one frog and hedge. You can be our new best friend. H-E-D-G-F-R-O-G. HedgeFrog on the Wii. Don't focus on that. Focus on my face. Yeah. It's all good. Okay.
Her?